Oh, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for Tuesday, the 19th of September 2023. Before we actually start the meeting, if I can just go through a couple of housekeeping issues or rules with you. So please can I remind all participants that this meeting will be recorded and a copy archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen or use the raise hand function. If a participant raises their hand via the function and is not subsequently invited to speak by the chair, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to speak by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphones and cameras are on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the chair and/or the Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or the Democratic Services Officer. If a participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or the Democratic officer know. So welcome to all committee members, cabinet members and officers, and also to anyone watching the live broadcast. Moving straight onto the agenda and beginning with agenda and apologies for absence. Do we have any, Gareth, at all?
It was just Councillor William, Chair. He's running a bit late, so he'll join us when he can.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Okay, now on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are members happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? I don't see any dissent, so yes, I assume that they are. If we could then receive any declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening, please? I can't see anybody indicating, so I assume that we don't. Okay, so then we can move on to agenda item 4. And this, we've got two, actually, before we go ahead, we've got 4 financial reports this evening, and we've got 2 financial officers with us. The first 2, Gemma Jones is going to be presenting, and as chair, I recommend that we actually move agenda items 8 and 9 up behind number 5 to get all the financial reports completed in one go. So after Emma has presented Gemma has presented her too, we'll have Claire James, who's replaced Matthew Sewell as our financial officer, who will normally report to this committee. Okay, so Gemma, if you would like to go ahead with the financial strategy 2024 to 25, if you'd like to give your report on that, please.
Lovely, thank you very much, Chair. I've just got a few slides to share on the financial strategy report, so I'll just share those now. So this report's very much a roll forward of the medium-term financial plan report that was brought as part of the final budget proposals back in February to Cabinet and then on to full council in early March, and so this report just rolls those projections forward. It looks at the strategy for the 24-25 and medium-term financial plan budget. It revisits the economic outlook for the period, and it just picks at where our starting point really in terms of the current 5-year position and our proposed approach. So we're proposing an approach that's similar to 23-24, and the principles of that approach are set out on this slide and within the report. Obviously, it's really important that we're looking at sustainable finances, and one thing we want to pick up is making sure that we have a medium-term financial plan that works rather than just focusing in on the next financial year. We need to continue to look at making sure that we've got appropriate levels of reserves, and you remember that fees and charges are a really important part of the budget setting for last year, and that will really feed into that process again. We want to make sure that we have collective responsibility for any budget that we set, and the budget that's set is accessible, apologies, and transparent. So just moving on to the next slide, in terms of the economic outlook, obviously CPI and inflation continues to be high, and the Bank of England base rate has increased and is still high. And this obviously impacts our communities, it impacts our employees, and it also has a significant impact of the cost of delivering services for the council. So a really challenging environment to be setting the budget within. So in terms of the current 5-year position, when we set the budget, we did projections for the medium-term financial plan period, and that gave us a starting point of a shortfall of 6.4 million for 24-25, and then there are smaller shortfalls across the period. As we know, the closer we get to the period, the greater the kind of cost pressures that we tend to get coming out of services, because we have better information. And we know that some of the pressures around inflation, particularly around pay, but also in areas such as social services, will drive up the cost pressures that we're reporting as part of this 5-year analysis. But all of that will be drawn out in the coming months as we head into the budget setting process. So we've currently asked directorates to revise their cost pressures, and those cost pressures are being revised and challenged within the management team, and we'll need to go through a couple of processes before they're brought to Cabinet and then on to Scrutiny Committee in November and December. We're working to a settlement period of December, so we're expecting a provisional settlement in December, but we are expecting a gap, and part of that gap closing, as it was last year, will need to be around savings, but we're really keen that we look for transformation themes as well, and it's important that we allow people enough time to develop these ideas, and so we're hoping to start drawing some of that information out in the coming weeks. And we do obviously have a reserve that's set aside for investment and reshaping, but there'll also need to be some of those slightly more traditional savings around income generation, looking at our workforce and our procurement, and drawing out some of those things around the digital strategy. And it might be that the transformational savings take a little bit longer to see an impact on the budget as well. So those were the main points that I was going to pick out on the report, but I'm happy to take any reports or comments.
Do you have anybody who would like to ask Gemma any question or make any comments at this stage? Councillor Champion, if you'd like to go ahead.
You mentioned adequate reserves, but you didn't sort of put a figure on that, because anyone can say, well, that's adequate. Yeah,
Chair, absolutely, through you. I mean, I think when we talk about reserves, obviously we're talking about lots of different things. So some of the reserves need to be adequate because we are earmarking them to fund part of the capital programme, and then obviously also there are reserves that we set aside for things like to enable an element of self-insurance, and we have some kind of external input into what an adequate level of reserves is for that. Obviously the Section 151 officer, as part of his review as part of the budget setting of reserves and whether we have sufficient funding in the council fund, he sets an amount there, and I think typically we've said around 12 million for the council fund. So obviously there's lots of different elements that make up our overall reserves figure, and there are reserves that are also we're holding because they're ring fenced as well. So I'm sorry, I know I've kind of skirted around the answer slightly there, but I think in terms of the council fund, obviously we've got quite a clear level of what would constitute an adequate reserve, but in terms of some of the other reserves, the picture's slightly more complex.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper, if you'd like to ask your question, and then I've got Councillor Lloyd-Selby. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chairman. Last year, the provisional settlement was quite a long way away from the final settlement. Have we got any indications as to whether or not it's going to be a little bit more accurate in September? Because it encourages us to make decisions and come up with solutions that, in the end, the settlement was significantly better than we thought it was going to be. Have you got any inklings coming through yet? Any thoughts? Thank you.
Apologies, Councillor Hooper, I haven't. I'm the information we've had from Welsh Government is they expect there to be a slight delay to the original timetable. So I think originally we were looking around the 12th of December, and we're now looking around the 19th of December for the provisional settlement. I think Welsh Government recognise that that's quite late in the budget setting process. It's a bit of a departure from where we would like to be, and so certainly I think they make attempts to try and get all the funding out there at that time. There were some elements of the funding that we were informed were going to follow as part of the final settlement, and that does account for some of the shift in the funding that we received. But obviously there are some other elements as well. So I would hope in prior years the provisional and final have been very close together in terms of value, and I'd hope that that would be the situation we'd have this year, but I don't have any information either way, unfortunately.
Thank you, Gemma. Councillor Lloyd-Selby, if you'd like to make your statement or ask a question, if you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a comment, Chair, rather than a question. Thank you, Gemma, for providing really helpful, clear report, which I think really helpfully sets out the pressures that the council is facing and the steps that officers are taking to manage those pressures. And clearly following on from Councillor Hooper's comment, the autumn budget will be critical as well, determining the settlement that, if there are indeed any changes of the settlement that comes to Wales, and therefore the flexibility that Welsh Government has in terms of supporting local government. And I note the report talks about the fact that in previous years the council's been able to move the focus away from savings-driven schemes, but the reality of the pressures that we're facing at the moment means that there will need to be a refocus on drivers, particularly drivers of cost pressures. And I think, you know, that's a welcome and practical refocusing. And I guess my thinking is just the report references, I think, section 2.9 about the key importance of community engagement and participation. And I found myself saying this in a number of committee meetings, but I just think it's important for us to acknowledge how critical it's going to be as clear in our communication as possible with residents, so they understand the constraints that the council is facing in terms of some really tough decisions that have to be made. This isn't about a wish list. We all have it. The council has ambitions, but clearly its focus is to protect statutory services. It has a responsibility to deliver, but also its focus is to protect the most vulnerable members of our society. And I think the more that we can do through our engagement with the public, just to help them understand the pressures that the council is facing, the better, really. So I think anything that we can do as local councillors to support that process, you know, we stand ready to do.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd-Selby. I've got Councillor Penn, if you'd like to make your statement or ask your question.
Thanks, Gemma. Always concise and in-depth and full. I think that we really need to acknowledge the pressures that Welsh Government have faced from Westminster, which then play into the pressures that the Vale faces and all other local authorities. I mean, I was doing a little bit of research, and you can find all sorts of figures on the funding gaps that Wales, the gap in the funding that we did get in EU funding, which really is impacting on Welsh Government's budget, which impacts on our budget. 1.8 billion lost, or not not honoured. That's too harsh a word. Replaced by Westminster. I mean, there was 155 million taken back by Westminster recently, which was really petty, I think, because we didn't spend it. That doesn't mean the Welsh Government doesn't need it. I think all these difficulties really play into the pressures that we are facing as Vale councils, and I think, you know, people need to understand why we are facing these pressures, and that the reasons don't always come from the Vale. The reasons don't always come from Welsh Government, whatever your, you know, allegiance. You know, if you keep delving far enough, you find the true reasons for why Welsh Government is facing such cost pressures, which means our finances are cut every year. I just think it's important that we you know, we look to the core of where our funding comes from and why that's been cut. Thank you. Bit of a ramble, but thanks, Gemma.
No, thank you for your input. I don't see anybody else wanting to make any input at this stage, so thank you, Gemma, for that. Obviously we've got those recommendations there. What I would say is one of the recommendations, you know, to lobby Welsh Government for an appropriate settlement in the face of continued inflationary pressures being experienced, and to, you know, authorise council officers to do the same through appropriate networks. And I think that is important, you know, that the council, this council has, as in many councils, have, you know, cut their sides, and we have to think about, you know, what we can afford next year with the cuts that are perhaps coming forward and things like that. So yes, so thank you everybody for your input. So if we happy to sort of accept those recommendations that are on page 3. We've also, if we note what perhaps Councillor Lloyd Selby had to say about ensuring that we communicate well with our communities to let them know what is actually happening with the financial side of things, would be helpful as well, so people are well aware, you know, of the choices that local councillors are having to make as well. So yes, so if we can move on to agenda item 5, and again, Gemma, I think this is you, and this is the draft capital strategy. Sorry, got the wrong TP. 2024 to 25, and the initial capital programme proposals 24 to 25 to 28 to 29. So if you'd like to go ahead, please, Gemma.
Lovely, thank you, and apologies, it is a bit of a mouthful of a title. So just a few slides on this one as well. Again, very much a scene-setting report for the capital strategy and initial capital programme proposals. The capital strategy that goes alongside this report is an enormous document, and a lot of what's in it is set out in the kind of sit for guidance, and has very much been rolled forward, but will need to be fully reviewed during the budget setting process. We're looking obviously at the longer term, and we're encouraged to extend the period of our capital projections as long as possible, because in terms of looking at the sustainability, but also looking at the kind of borrowing options and capital resources as well. And we're identifying priority areas for capital investment and some of the other external factors. And there are links in with the Treasury Management Strategy. So a number of the performance indicators that are linked with the Treasury Management Strategy are reproduced in the capital strategy. We do know what our likely funding for 24-25 is, but we don't have any projections beyond that point. So we have made an estimate projecting those capital resources forward. So in terms of our starting point of our 5-year capital programme, that's set out by directorate on this slide. In terms of the content of some of these lines, so that are relevant to this scrutiny committee, so within environment, we have a sum of around 800,000 for vehicle replacement. We have a sum for resurfacing, which isn't anywhere near what I think the department would ideally like in terms of road resurfacing. And we also have a sum that was allocated as part of the 23-24 capital programme around looking at funding some of the works that are needed in our bridge structures. But that's, you know, in terms of bridge works, that's quite a low level allocation of funding. In terms of the schemes that are relevant to this committee within place, we have a rolling allocation for the Barry Regeneration Partnership, and that's around 300,000 each annual year. We do have the non-treasury investment strategy that's now been reflected in the pipeline schemes, and that's profiled across the first 4 years of the 5-year capital programme. And all that means is that those pipeline schemes are subject to approval of business case before they get moved up then into the overall capital programme, but they're included in pipeline schemes for planning purposes. The next slide just sets out the kind of overall funding of the capital programme, and I suppose it just shows the kind of variety of sources of funding that we used to fund the capital programme, and obviously things like capital receipts, grants, Section 106, as well as our general capital funding. We can use reserves, and we've got a sizable contribution from reserves in this financial year and next financial year, and also we can utilise unsupported borrowing, but obviously there is a revenue impact of any unsupported borrowing. So what has been for some of the
you might have just frozen then, Gemma, just slightly, just as you were reading the end of the last slide. I don't know if you can go back. I thought it was me to begin with.
Absolutely. So in terms of on the last slide, I think I was just picking up around unsupported borrowing being one of the sources of funding, and that would have an impact on the revenue budget that we would need to factor in there. In terms of next steps, the capital programme has been updated for some of the slippage and some of the changes to the report that went to Cabinet in July. We have gone out and asked for new capital bids to be invited for return, and we've asked for those back in October. Those capital bids will be taken forward to be evaluated by Strategic Insight Board in November. We are then proposing that the revised capital proposals are brought to Cabinet and Scrutiny in January 2024, and that will be informed by the provisional settlement as well. We can then go out to consultation on that with a view to hitting the kind of March deadline in terms of setting the budget. So those are the main points that I was going to draw out on that report, but again, happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Gemma. Councillor Hooper, if you'd like to ask your question.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again, Gemma. Just it's an observation really. We've got the city deal starting to come through now with the first lots of capital funding. I think this committee needs to, going forward, take a keen interest in that, as I would encourage all councillors, because actually, as Councillor Lloyd-Selby mentioned earlier about our need to be able to influence the general public in terms of what's happening with finance, they'll be keenly interested in how we're spending money, or how other people are spending money, our money essentially, on our behalf. So I think it's something that we need to keep an eye on. You'll see it building, and we need to make sure that the strategies benefit the Vale as they do other parts of the city deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillor Champion, if you'd like to ask your question or make your statement, sorry.
Section 108, sorry, 106, is sort of ramping up quite significantly. I wonder if is that just a speculation, or is it a lot of new big schemes coming on that will get lots of Section 106?
Chair, through you. So obviously there's been quite a lot of development within the authority boundary in recent years, and those schemes have tended to bring Section 106 sums with them that have been negotiated, and so it's some of those Section 106 schemes funding starting to be brought through into some of those schemes that are hitting the capital programme. So we have a period of time to spend those Section 106 schemes once they're received, and sometimes it can take a bit of time, I suppose, to work up schemes, and we're using Section 106 across the whole programme. So there's Section 106 contributions to some of our sustainability communities for learning schemes, for instance, but also some of our kind of play area works, and so really broad use of Section 106 schemes to kind of support the infrastructure around those developments as they come through.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for both your questions there. With the capital city deal, obviously, as chair of Environment and Regeneration, I sit on the Scrutiny Committee. And what I would say is that with Aberthaw Power Station actually being purchased by the members of the city deal, I think, you know, the money that's been spent down there will benefit all of us. And I think the green power that will be produced there, I think will be benefit to all of the members of the city deal. So I think, you know, yes, you are right, Councillor Hooper. Let's keep an eye on what the money's being spent on. But I think there are good and progressive ways forward with the city deal that are actually in happening at the moment, with the transport links and different things like that that are going to be beneficial to everybody within the city deal area. I think that will be good, and the Aberthaw Power Station is a real positive as well. But thank you, Gemma, for that report. We've got recommendations again here to approve the draft capital strategy for 24-25 and for members to be appraised of the initial status of the capital programme, which we have been. So are we happy to accept those? Sorry, the recommendations, those are the reasons. The recommendations are for Cabinet to approve the draft capital report, for it to come to us, for us to have a look at and to hear about. Everybody happy to accept those recommendations? Sorry, Gareth.
I'll second.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Obviously, the resolutions in the report are the cabinet resolutions.
Okay, sorry.
I think you're really being to comment, or if you're not going to comment, then obviously just to note the report.
Okay. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to note. Is everyone else happy to note? Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you, Gemma, for those two reports. So as I said, we're now going to carry on with the financial reports. And I'd like to welcome Claire James, who's our new financial officer for reporting to this committee, who's taken over from Matthew Sewell. So if you'd like to, the report is the Q1 revenue monitoring for 2023 to 24. So if you'd like to go ahead, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. The table shown within the executive summary sums up the original budget of £305 million with an anticipated nil variance against it. And to make the report more user-friendly, a set of slides have actually been drawn up. And if I could go through those slides, I think Gemma is going to help me by doing the slides, because to do two things at once might be too much. Is that okay with you, Gem?
Fantastic.
Yes, of course. Just give me 1 moment just to pull them up, Claire. Apologies.
Okay, thank you.
1 moment. Okay.
Thank you, Jen. This first table replicates a table which is on the face of the Q1 revenue monitoring report. And it is showing variances within social services of £1 million and within environmental and housing of £1 million. And both of those overspends are likely to be offset by a £2 million contribution from policy. And that £2 million is funded by interest earned by the authority on the balances held. So that will enable the service or the authority to outturn on a net nil position. If I move on to the next slide, there are some key headlines in respect of the revenue. There are emerging pressures within social services, and they are masked by the planned and unplanned use of reserves, which total around £7 million. There are increased costs of care packages and the cost of residential homes, and these have been offset in part by staff vacancies. Ongoing pressures in neighbourhood services include potholes and patching. and staffing budgets including market forces payments. There's some emerging pressures in place in respect of income and shortfall against savings. And there are some other underspends in policy, and these have continued internal sorry, I'll start that again. I do apologise. Some underspends in policies and with continued internal borrowing and investment income, therefore enabling an offsetting £2 million worth of income to offset those £2 million overspends within revenue. If I move on to the next slide, this details the savings proposals and achievement of targets for the year 2023-24. The blue line actually indicates the savings targets being set. The yellow bar is the mitigation which some services have been able to input to offset some of their issues. And the orange bar are the expected savings to be achieved to date. At this time, there are savings and mitigating active remain below the overall savings targets for 2023. So as you can see, the savings target is significantly more. If I move over to environment and housing, there's a sorry, Gemma, I do apologise.
You're right, don't worry, go ahead, Claire, you're fine.
Within environment and housing, there's projected overspends of £1 million, which are going to be offset by policy. Highways, patching and potholes. There are some issues here because this just defers the impact of the issues and not a long-term solution, but they still need to be addressed. There are energy costs increases, and this is due to the price increases across all suppliers. And this is particularly being felt within street lighting energy, despite those bulbs used in street lighting being changed for more efficient bulbs, the costs are still exceeding the budget. There's some issues within staffing budgets as a result of the market force payments to the HGV drivers. The transport budgets have increased costs of fuel and parts, thus reducing the set-aside available funding for future renewals. There are also some significant lags in the availability of parts for repairs for the vehicles, which could incur some additional costs as a result of hiring additional vehicles because the costs of repairing are insignificant if you can't get the parts for the repairs. There's also some issues with ash dieback where work continues, however, there is no specific allocated budget. The staff award built into the overall budget was set at 6% within the budget for 23-24. However, if the pay award is greater than that, it will result in expenditure in excess of budget across the authority. And at this time, the neighbourhood reserve is fully committed to capital schemes, so we have no spare. Some key pressures on the next slide for place. The overspend is to be offset by the use of reserves. Within Regenerations, there's some problems, some issues at the Vale Enterprise Centre, and it's likely to be there's likely to be demand on the budget due to increased costs of empty property rates, coupled with the reduced rental income from mothballing phase 3, which due to age and condition is no longer fit for purpose. Planning fees are currently on target, but there are concerns over the position of the economy and rises in inflation, which could affect this position by year end. If I move on to the next slide, detailed as the use of reserves. If you note at the column 1, the balances as at the 1st of April 2023, the balance held is just over £110 million. However, the estimated balance just a year later drops down to £54.5 million. And this includes capital funding for the various schemes and planned transfers to and from the reserves. There's also some unplanned drawdowns of the reserves valued at just over £3 million. And this results in a £55.6 million reduction in the estimated value as at March 24. I'm happy to take any questions on the revenue monitoring.
Thank you, Claire. Do I have any questions for Claire? Councillor Ernest, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, good evening, Claire. One thing that crossed my mind, or the one I saw, was about the ash dieback. There's a lack of a budget for that. I think every member on this committee knows very well it's a very serious problem in the Vale, and I can only speak for Bernard, but we're seeing quite substantial numbers of trees failing and having to be taken out because of ash dieback. Do you think it would be appropriate to put a provisional sum in there for dealing with that, so that when parks, I use the word generally, when parks have to deal with this, they're not having to draw down on funds from other sources?
There are some issues right across the authority in line with budgets, that perhaps there's not as much budget available as the authority would like to be given to all departments and sections. So if a budget was to be increased, then perhaps representation when the budget setting process was commencing might be a good time to see if additional funds can be granted to take on additional activities such as ash dieback, or be able to fund them. Jen, would you like to step in? Is there any comments you'd like to pass on this?
Yeah, happy to. So we've been funding ash dieback to date from an element of the Project Zero reserve. So when it was first set up, it was green infrastructure, Project Zero, and ash dieback. So we've ring fenced a sum within that reserve to fund ash dieback. I think, as with all things, we perhaps had underestimated the scale of the challenge around ash dieback. So I think we've been allocating a kind of recurring sum to place, because obviously that there's elements of the ash dieback that have to be dealt with within country parks, and I think that's going really well in terms of replanting trees as well. We are spending a considerable sum within environment and housing, and that's partly because the nature of the trees is that they're next to the roadside, and so there's lots of traffic works that are required as part of addressing those ash dieback works. I think we're thinking we need a sum of around 200,000, but it's just working out how sustainable that is, whether that's needed in perpetuity or whether that's needed for a period of time, and we do need to make sure that that's reflected in the cost pressures as they go forward, whether that's revenue or capital, because obviously it will be dependent on whether those trees are being replaced by tree planting, or whether they're being taken down because they're by the roadside, and we need to look at alternative replacement options.
Yes, I think that is exactly the problem, that trees are being taken out, but they're not being replaced at the present time, and that's a matter of some concern to residents generally. I'm sure across the Vale I hear quite a lot about that. I have just one other point for you, Claire. The Vale Resource Centre, it's many years since I went in there last, but to see that it's mothballed and attracting business rates when the property is a void, I'm wondering whether perhaps we should look at disposal of that particular asset if we can't use it, and maybe another owner could actually get the building up in good shape if we haven't got the resources for it. Would you care to comment on that?
I can see exactly where you're coming from, Councillor, and there do seem to be some fantastic ideas. I don't think it would be my place to actually comment on that. It would be for the Director of Place to perhaps be the one to pass comment.
But I still ask, because you're good enough to be here this evening.
I do have Phil Chappell.
Thank you then, Chairman. Thank you.
I do have Phil Chappell there. I don't know if you wanted to come in at that point, if you don't mind waiting, Councillor Willem.
Yeah,
if you want to go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Ernest, yeah, it was just about the Vale Enterprise Centre, so I thought as I was here I could probably answer some of the questions. We've done various options appraisals on the facility, and I think specifically with phase 3, I mean, I think that the sums involved looking at kind of renovation of it, fixing it, conversion, are all way in excess of what funding is available for the council. So it's basically we're managing, we're working with the tenants that are there. We've got problems with water ingress, and obviously this site has an issue with flooding. It's a very, very old site, and it was a legacy kind of lease that was signed many, many years ago. So I think the focus is on making it suitable and safe for the residents, the tenants that are there. But it was running into millions to fix some of the buildings there, and it's probably the cheapest tenanted business units in the Vale at the moment. So it would, the investment wouldn't have been a valid use of public money.
Well, thank you very much. I'm grateful for the explanations of the officers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Willem, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry I'm late for this meeting.
Oh no, it's okay.
I was in
don't
transit. Thank you. I would like to support what Councillor Ernest has said. I was on a visit only a few months ago with an officer and was shocked when, after I brought a lot of trees to this officer's attention, the answer I got was that they couldn't do anything about them, even when there were certain trees suffering from ash dieback. They'd have to wait for them to become much, much worse before they actually did anything. So I do think we really do need to think about allocating proper budget, not just for ash, but for all sorts of trees. It's a real problem, and in certain areas of the Vale, it's a very big problem indeed. And like I say, trees in general, not just ash.
Thank you, Councillor Willem. I've now got, sorry. Sorry, I've got the first top name is hidden from me for some strange reason. It's
sorry, Chair.
Emma Reid. Did you want to speak? Did you want to speak, Emma?
Only just to come back on the tree issue and the ash dieback issue, which has been spoken about by Councillor Willem and Councillor Ernest. There will be a tree strategy coming to Cabinet shortly, which will cover all trees, not just the issue of ash dieback. So that may be of interest for Scrutiny Committee when that comes through. And where possible, we do plant 2 trees for every tree that goes. It's not necessarily, though, as Councillor Ernest will know, in the same place as where the tree was taken. So it may be that we have to plant it somewhere else in order to manage. But when the tree strategy comes before you, you'll have a chance to have a look at that, to comment on that, and to obviously say how you think things should be done moving forward. So that'll be, that'll be the way that I would suggest that you actually contribute to that debate. Sorry, Chair. Just
no, that's great. Are both councillors happy with that?
Yes,
that will be coming to this committee at some stage.
I hope so, Chair. Thank you. And I'm very reassured by what Emma has said. It's just that through yourself, I would just like to say it's not just about the planting of trees, it's also about the removing of trees that really shouldn't be there as well. We need to be managing them holistically. Thank you.
And I'm sure that will be within the tree strategy when we get
Chairman,
that.
Can I just say that we understood the tree strategy would be coming to this September meeting. So do we have a definite date for that, as we've slipped from September?
Emma has her hand back up, so I'm going to let her speak.
The ball is firmly in my court, Councillor Ernest. I do have a draft of it. I need to run through it just to check everything's correct. Then obviously it needs to go through our Cabinet member. So we're aiming to get it to Cabinet to October. So it should be your November Scrutiny Committee meeting with a following wind. But I do take the point about removal of trees that are unfit as well. And that's a point that if you don't feel it's correctly reflected in the strategy, although I'll obviously take that back tonight to check that, please feel free to raise that when it does come before you. And apologies for the delay, Councillor Ernest. It's just we've got quite a few important projects on at the moment within the area, and that one is with me.
All right. Thank you very much, then. I'm grateful.
Thank you. And I think both councillors are satisfied that, and we look forward to having the tree strategy come to this committee so we can discuss it more fully as well. So thank you for that, Emma.
Yeah. If I can just put a shameless plug for Romley Park to be looked at.
Right, okay, that's your only plug for this evening, Councillor Willem. Okay, Councillor Perry, if you'd like to go next.
Good evening. Yeah, and I can tell you a dead tree that's above the lane that goes down towards Pendoylan, and at some point those branches are just going to snap off in the wind. I want to sort of take us on to the stick with highways and talk about resurfacing. Obviously, we cut the budget.
We're not actually talking about that at this stage. We haven't come on to that one.
The highway patching potholes just came up, didn't it?
We're going to actually speak about it in another report. So I don't know if you want to wait at the moment and speak about it when it actually comes up, because we'll have a full discussion then.
Okay, because there was also street lighting, and the street lighting is also over budget. Are there any ways of bringing the street lighting budget down, or the budget the same, but the actual cost down?
I think I'll let Emma speak, but I know within the last administration that all the street lighting was changed to more efficient, LED, energy efficient. LED. Yes. So I'll let Emma, if you want to go ahead, Emma.
Yeah, so we've obviously made a major investment, luckily, as a council to move everything to LED, because if we hadn't have gone to LED, our bills would be even worse than they are at the moment. So the LED strategy was definitely the right decision made by the council to progress that. In terms of reducing energy costs of street lighting moving forward, we haven't discussed that within house at the moment, but there are obviously limited cost benefits. You could look at park night lighting. We've been there before. So you could look at turning some lights off between 12 and 6, but the actual benefits of that and the financial savings of that are not as great as they were when we were on the previous lighting and not on LED systems. So I suppose we hope that energy prices will have peaked and will fall a little bit, and we'll pick that up. But we are using as a council the most energy efficient lighting we can, and short of turning some of those off, for substantial periods of time, it's going to be challenging to reduce that budget further. So sorry, Councillor Perry, I can't help any more than that at this stage. If you've got any ideas, I'm happy to take them though.
Thank you.
It's very, park night lighting is very, very controversial, as we found it last time, even though it's done elsewhere in South Wales.
Absolutely, the people we'd have to consult to ensure the safety and everything else that's done it's a big job, and it wouldn't necessarily yield the benefits now because it's LED that it did previously. So it's a discussion that needs to be had along with all of the other discussions with all of the other budgets for my area.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors, for all your input there. Are we happy to accept these recommendations, that we note the revenue budget for the authority and note the environments included as part of the report as set out in table 1? Is everybody happy to note that? I don't see any dissent, so thank you for that. So if we can move on to agenda, which is agenda item 9, which is the capital monitoring for the period 1st of April to the 30th of June 2023. And Claire, I think you're leading on this one as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. The report gives an update on the progress for the capital programme between the 1st of April 2023 and the 30th of June 2023. At the time of writing, the approved programme totalled £125.8 million, and this included budgets slipped from 22-23 into 23-24 of £8.733 million, as shown in the third column of the slides that are in front of you. If the requests within this report to amend the capital programme are approved, the revised forecast outturn is projected to be £126.045 million, and the spend to the end of June is £9.093 million. And it's important to note that many areas are continuing to experience an increase in associated costs with the delivery of schemes. Tenders are being received over the current allocated budgets, and officers are reporting the requirement to renegotiate submitted tenders. Officers continue to work with project managers and sponsors to ensure value for money and that all funding opportunities are fully explored. Schemes are being closely monitored throughout the year to identify overspends and slippages. Slippage is anticipated later in the financial year and will be requested in Q2 monitoring report in October. Appendix 1 details the financial progress on the capital programme as at the 30th of June. by scheme, and Appendix 2 sets out the directorates and the changes from the approved budget at final proposals in February 23. Movements in year, including slippages and additions, and demonstrates the journey to the revised forecast outturn of 23-24. The report details recent delegated authorities, requests that have been approved, and also notes the use of emergency powers, which are detailed in Appendix 1 to the report. There are 2 requests under the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee Additions, Amendments and Reprofiling section of the report that are within the remit of this Scrutiny Committee. A budget of 250,000 is currently on the capital programme for highway surfacing. The request is to via 200,000 from the asset renewal section of highway surfacing to a new scheme for footway reconstruction works, and the remaining 50,000 to existing neighbourhood services highway improvement schemes to provide a new budget of 1.536 million. And the second request is to add a new scheme for an allotment grant for £29,000 a year in both 23-24 and 24-25 capital programme. The 2 delegated authorities have been approved that are within the remit of this Scrutiny Committee. The first request is to increase the budget of an existing scheme of the Barry Dock interchange to enable security works at the former BT depot site at Barry Waterfront for 13,000, and that's to be funded by Section 106 monies. And the second is to include a new scheme with a budget of 17,000 to extend the existing footpath at Seal Park to improve access to the play area, which is also to be funded by Section 106 monies. In addition, £4.089 million has been secured from Welsh Government in relation to the Active Travel Fund 23-24, and the breakdown of that is core active travel having 645,000, the Eglwys Brewers Active Travel Route having 2.433 million, Roost Station Road Active Travel of 674,000, and Port Road and Wendow Active Travel Improvements of £336,000. The allotment grant has an allocation of funding, and it's been awarded for an allotment support grant for the period 1st of April 23 to the 31st of March 25, both years having 29,000 budget. And the primary purpose of the funding is to increase the availability of good quality allotment plots, but may be used for other activities such as improving accessibility and increasing biodiversity. The Celtic Way Park and play area up in Roos has delegated authority and has been approved to include a new scheme in the Council's 23-24 capital programme with a budget of 181,000, and that's to be funded by Section 106 monies. And the proposal will upgrade the existing play equipment and undertake ancillary works at the Celtic Park, Way Park and play area following consultation with elected members.
Thank you. Okay, have you finished, Claire?
There were some capital key highlights. I was just looking through them. We've got the Target Hardening Grant with an award of funding has been successful, and funding of 44,000 has been secured from Welsh Government for the installation of CCTV cameras and intruder kits. We've also got the inclusion of Strong Communities capital schemes. And I think for this particular committee, that's about it then.
Lovely.
Oh, sorry, I do tell a lie. There's the Lantwick Major Leisure Centre, improvements to toilets and changing rooms. Delegated authority has been approved to increase the council's capital programme by 238,000 and is to be funded by Section 106 monies. Facilities will be improved at the toilets and changing rooms at Lantwick Major Leisure Centre as a result. Sorry, that is it now.
Oh no, that's lovely. Thank you very much for those 2 reports, Claire. I'll see if anybody's got any comments or questions that they might like to ask. I can't see anybody indicating at the moment. There we go. Councillor Ernest, if you'd like to either make a statement or ask your question.
Yes, Chairman. Can I just look at the 2.25 on page 8 of the report of the Barry Dock interchange? As members know, this is a very substantial development that's been carried out at the dock offices, as I prefer to call it, at a cost of 1.524 million. But I hear reports in the press that in fact there is no transport to the new facility at the dock offices. So it's a little bit of a white elephant because it's not providing additional parking for for private vehicles, but the idea is that it'll be for bus services. But since the 88 bus was taken off the other day by the operators, I'm just wondering whether the officer could tell me which bus services are actually using this rather £1.5 million development.
Okay, I think that is probably Emma. I think it's probably you again rather than Claire who will provide that answer for us. Emma, if you're happy to answer that question,
yes, Chair.
Please feel free.
Absolutely, Chair. Yeah, the dock office interchange, it's not just a bus interchange. That's the first point I want to make. It does include many other facilities and options, including lay-bys for drop-off, also includes the taxi lay-by. It also includes electric bikes, electric charging points as well. So there's a number of different things that the space actually uses. It was funded, as I'm sure you know, Councillor Ernest, by City Deal, mainly City Deal funding, and it's I don't know if anybody's had the chance to go and have a look, but it's a really exemplary project. Now, we did have, as you said, the 88 that was going to be using the area, and we're also in negotiations with Adventure Travel and Cardiff Bus about their services using the drop-off and changeover point there. However, as you know, bus services are challenging at the moment. The finances surrounding bus services since COVID have been really challenging, as have patronage. And the Welsh Government has been underpinning bus services for the last few years since COVID. We're at a bit of a crossroads with that at the moment, and how that goes forward is going to be very much a matter of discussion between Welsh Government and South East Wales and other local authorities in Wales moving forward. So the interchange didn't come, I think, at the best time. If it had been a few years ago, before COVID, we would have had a lot more negotiating power, but at the moment we don't. But one thing I would say is it's located very well next to developments that are ongoing in terms of the waterfront. We're looking at linkages for that, and it does relate well to the train station. So it's a classic example for me of checking that we've got the right infrastructure to attract bus services into the area moving forward and also retain them. So look, I don't know what's going to happen post-November, April next year with bus services, but we're definitely in for a challenging time, Councillor Ernest. So I think if we've got the best facilities in place, that puts us a little bit in front of everybody else to start with.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Emma. I think that's very good. I think perhaps members of the committee might like to have a visit to see the facility in the light of the excellent facilities you just outlined, Emma. No doubt perhaps Gareth will be able to arrange that for the committee. But thank you for that answer. I'm grateful. Thank you, Chairman.
As we know, this committee is always happy to go and take visits to different places, which we've done previously. And I'm sure a visit to the new transport hub at Barry Docks will be very interesting. So perhaps we can do that in the future. So thank you for that, Councillor Ernest. Councillor Perry, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, we just stay with the bus interchange. I've actually been to have a look at it, and it's very scenic, and there's nice little things of bees and other insects. But there are 4 bus shelters and no bus routes at the moment. How many bus routes and buses per hour would justify 4 bus shelters?
Sorry, I was going to say, I think it's better to, like Emma said, to actually have that infrastructure there so that we can attract the actual buses to it. And I'd rather that we did have something there, we want people to use the public transport, don't we? And it's just unfortunate we're in the position that we are at the moment. But Emma, if you wanted to say anything else, please feel free.
I think actually, Chair, you've said that very eloquently. But essentially, Councillor Perry, we've got 21st infrastructure that is there. It is a really nice project. It's very befitting of the listed building that it joins and of the new development that is happening in Barry Waterfront at the moment. It very much puts, public transport at the front of the development of the waterfront, which is really important. The shelters that you mentioned, obviously we needed to provide as many shelters as we could within the space that we had available in order to try and get the frequency of bus services up in that area. As I said to the previous question that Councillor Ernest asked, we're in a really difficult position with buses at the moment, and that position has changed quite substantially from when we did the original business case and when we originally took things forward. None of us could have foreseen COVID and the issues that would happen there. I'm just grateful that actually we secured the funding from City Deal to deliver this 21st century interchange at this location. So 4 shelters, we can have quite a few buses there longer term. Hopefully Councillor Perry, once the things pick up and the market picks up.
Yeah, so it's City Deal's money. Was it 100% City Deal money?
Mostly City Deal money. There's a very small amount of Section 106 money as well, but no money from the council. Even our fees have been paid. So it's mostly Welsh Government money, City Deal money, topped up by a bit of 106.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper, if you'd like to ask your question.
Thanks, Chair. And it's just pointed out, we've just had it now, this is City Deal strategy that seems to be not knowing one side from the other. Remember, Cardiff Council run Cardiff Bus, who are the company who've been reducing the services here. There needs to be some joined up thinking. If we're going to I fully support having more people on buses, we need to really find a way of doing it. And COVID has been a problem for us. I accept that, and I hear what Emma's saying. But actually, this is a strategic issue, and the fact that the money hasn't come from our coffers is actually immaterial. We need to see the benefits of these things, and I want to really make sure that the City Deal is thinking about these things strategically. And we should be a committee that should be willing and able to scrutinise these decisions, because they're things that affect the residents of the Vale and they affect the residents of Barry. So I'm glad that Councillor Ernest saw it. I'm glad he saw our press release in the paper as well, which is a good thing. Thank you.
You're not publicising yourself at all, Mark Hooper. What I would say is that I suppose that these sort of projects are decided years in advance. If you go up near past Treforest or up near there, up towards Treforest, I'm sure that there's a big project that's happening there that's to do with the actual network rail infrastructure. Emma, if you'd like to come back in.
Just to say, it was actually envisaged originally by the previous adopted local development plan as part of the Barry Waterfront development. So, this isn't just something that's come overnight. We're just really lucky to have benefited from City Deal money and that to have happened prior to COVID, really, and be able to take this project forward, because we might be in a very, very different position if we hadn't have done it as quickly as we did and had started it now. So for me, I think the City Deal has worked really well there for us. I'm really pleased with what's happened, and the project for me is a success.
Thank you. And what I would say is that City Deal is scrutinised. It is scrutinised by the 10 local authorities that are part of it. So it is scrutinised already. So, it does happen. It isn't just something that's suddenly, this amorphous element, City Deal, decides what they want to do. It is actually scrutinised and decided on by the 10 local authorities that are part of it. I've got Councillor Liz Burnett and then Councillor Bronwyn Brooks. So Liz, if you'd like to come in first, please.
Actually, Chair, having seen that Councillor Brooks is here, she is much better placed. But what I will say is that I'm sorry I'm a bit late joining, because I've actually been on the bus home. Worked very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for indulgence. I think it's just to offer that reassurance around our bus services, and it is incredibly uncertain at the moment, but it's really about to offer that reassurance that our officers and Emma's team, and Kyle Phillips is an important part of that team, and the rest, and every other officer, sat around every possible meeting to ensure that we try to get the bus services that we need. Yes, we know there are issues, and we know there are issues with user numbers and the uncertainty around funding, obviously post-COVID, because that's a direct impact on the funding that we have. But I firmly believe that our officers cannot work any harder than they are, to ensure that our bus services, or our voices firmly around that table, to try and make sure that we get the bus services that serve our communities. Because I'm an absolute firm believer in our public transport. And really, just another note around the intermodal interchange there, that it is not just for buses. It is to serve the trains. There's much better parking. It's also for taxis. And I know for sure that taxis are actually using that area now. They're picking up from the trains, so that it is starting to come into use. And obviously, the buses are a crucial part of that. And along with that, then we had the improvements there, and I mean huge improvements around Subway Road. And I think everybody who uses that area has got to admit that that's hugely enhanced that area and much safer for our residents to actually use that area. So that goes hand in glove with that. So I think let's not try and put too much pressure on our officers, because they are there and they are working hard, and I think they're literally breathing and sleeping buses at the moment, and to try and make sure that we do retain the services and enhance some of our services to make sure that we serve the residents in the Vale of Glamorgan. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Okay, so that was, sorry, you have to excuse me. I've got the cat sat on my papers. Right, so are we happy to note this report that's come to us as well and accept the recommendations that are in front of us? Yes, I can't see any dissent, so I'm assuming that yes, everyone's accepting that. Right, okay. If we can then go back to agenda item 6, and that is the revised highway maintenance 3-year plan. And I believe Nathan, and have I got a Colin as well, or is it just you, Nathan, who's presenting this?
I think it's just me, Chair.
Okay, yeah, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce this report, please.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you said about the cat walking across your desk, because I've just had to put my needy dog out the back. Otherwise, she would nag me constantly throughout. So, evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the invite. It's just an opportunity for me, really, to speak and to give you a bit of an insight to the report. I haven't got any fancy slideshows. I'm just going to highlight a couple of points within the report, and then I'll reference them throughout, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions at the end. So the title of the report being the Revised Highway Maintenance 3-Year Plan of 22 to 24. The 7th of July 2022, Cabinet approved the Highway Maintenance 3-Year Plan for 22-24. However, at that time, we had an allocation of budget of 2.3 million, and given the fund reduction for this year of 23-24 of 1.2 million, I think I met with Colin and Emma, and we all felt that it was important that we needed to bring this to the attention of Cabinet and just discuss a couple of points throughout. I think it's immensely important that the 3-year plan provides the foundation for the delivering a well-maintained and managed highway network, which is essential to sustain the Vale of Glamorgan's economic, social and transport needs. I think we have we do have a section 41 of the Highways Act 1980 places a legal statutory obligation on the Highway Authority to maintain the highway at public expense, and all of that is contained within the executive summary. Within the executive summary as well, we've had the luxury of 350,000 additional funds, and this is to be spent specifically on asphalt treatment. So that's commonly known as micro asphalt. And just to describe that in such a way that maybe everybody understands, it's in its simplest terms, it's a bitumen emulsion mixed with a much smaller aggregate, which generally seals up any sort of early signs of deterioration, or it prevents water ingress, because let's be fair, as soon as the water gets in and we have the colder temperatures of the year, we'll have frost heave, and then all of the formation layers of the highway soon start to fail. So it's important for us to sort of invest in preventative works as well as larger scale resurfacing works. Within the report and the recommendations, I've been quite clear of point 6 within the recommendations that we have to be quite selective at each location. So whilst we have each site listed, and I'll use Quarry Road as an example, we will not resurface the full length of Quarry Road. We have to be very, very selective, and we can only remove material which is of poor condition. I think we'll get scrutinised and criticised by members of the public should we remove material which is of sound condition. And I think that's really important for me, especially when we got very little monies to spend. I think another point that I wanted to pick up on really was the fact that many of the elected members, you'll have your constituents approaching you, requesting certain sites are resurfaced or suggested for resurfacing. We've got a cabinet approved matrix, whereby an officer of my team, for consistency, it's always the same officer, will go to a site and he'll look at each site and we'll assess it. But I think whilst we can assess it and add it to the 3-year plan, that's not a problem. With the monies that we have available to us, we certainly can't target every location on that list. So I think it's important to the members that you're all aware. We're more than happy to add any sites to the list, but we can only work with the monies available to us. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Do I have any questions? Councillor Iannucci, if you'd like to ask your question first.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Nathan. There's a really helpful report. I just had a couple of questions. So I was wondering whether the matrix had any current plans or what the timeline was for including sort of smaller potholes that might be a risk to cyclists if they're at the side of the road rather than sort of the big ones that car users would have. And then I wanted to check as well, is there any, I can't see it sort of specifically on the matrix, but any consideration for how many potholes need to be reported on a road before you look at resurfacing in general, sort of if you're going out and filling a pothole quite often, whether that counts towards just resurfacing the whole road?
Yeah, thank you very much. Generally, within every assessment that's undertaken at a location, and I'll use Quarry Road as an example again, the officer that undertakes the assessment will use the cabinet approved matrix. He will also look at third-party claims, how much we've invested in that location, not just within a 12-month period, but they'll often go back 2 or 3 years. We're very lucky whereby we've recently changed our asset management system. So we've gone from a system previously known as Mayrise, which was okay in its simplest form. It recorded the data, whereby we've now gone to a system called Confirm, which records the data a lot more accurately. So we've got a little bit more information to hand now than what we may have previously. So in respects to smaller potholes, generally smaller potholes, if they're insignificant in their size or their scale, we will always record them and we'll react to them using the pothole minor work sort of allocation of funds. But if there's only a few along a certain stretch, then we'll just react to them under routine maintenance through regular inspections. The highway inspectors, they undertake their routine inspections regularly. We are on date. We are not behind on our inspections. We're very fortunate that we've got 4 highway inspectors in the team, all very experienced, all very confident and competent within their roles. And should there be like an absence from work for whatever reason, there's enough of us in the team that we can step in and to take those inspections. So I've got confidence in our frequency of inspections. With respect to the second part of your question in reporting of potholes, it is important, and I think for me, and I know certain councillors I've pushed back on previously, and I've said, whilst I'll always take any concerns being raised, it's immensely important that our information is fed back through C1V, because many councillors might put a pothole on my radar, for example, but it's not recorded. So when we then look at Confirm to see how many actionable defects or how many times we've reacted to a pothole, no matter how dangerous, if it's come to me via an email, we're missing the trick, and that information isn't recorded. And I know certain councillors have pushed back, and especially when a customer hasn't had a reply, by all means, bring it to my attention and we'll escalate it internally. That's no problem at all. Does that answer your question? Is that okay?
And yeah, that's great. I was sort of more wondering specifically, sorry, Chair, if it's okay, if you have, say a road has had 12 potholes, a very large road, has got something like 12 potholes, and you're going out fairly regularly to fill slightly further along. But like perhaps that would be a problem with the surface of the road in general. Is that something that would be considered?
It would be. It certainly would be. I think we have a varying network of varying formations. If you look at some of our roads, such as Port Road in Wenville, 25,000 vehicles a day, it's got fantastic formation. If you go to some of the rural areas of the Vale, for example, the Western Vale, we've literally got a surface course on generally. It's like track roads, all agricultural roads, and unfortunately, at some point in the past, they've been adopted, but not necessarily brought up to a adoptable standard. So we can simply only put a plaster over it. But then we would look at if we would generally do, say, for example, we're going to do resurfacing work, we would do deep planing, which is rather than a 40 mil inlay, we would look to go slightly deeper to take the issue out.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper, if you'd like to ask your question next.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Nathan. Just pick up the point that Councillor Iannucci made about cyclists. I'm not sure that was answered properly, so I wonder whether you could go back to that one again. It wasn't the point I was making, but I think cyclists, when a car may get damaged by a pothole, a cyclist could end up getting seriously hurt by a small pothole. So I just wonder whether you could go back to that one again. I'd appreciate that. But the question, and this is a point of complete ignorance, but I just wonder whether the 20 mile an hour new will that make any difference to the potholes? Because obviously cars are going to hit the potholes, we would hope, at slower speeds. The damages should be less. Do you see anything that will change our future view on road resurfacing as a result of 20 mile an hour? Thank you.
Okay, but thank you, Councillor Hooper. Apologies for not picking up on the cycling question. I think generally our intervention criteria is set, and it has been for many years. We'll have an intervention criteria in the carriageway of 40 mil. Whilst I appreciate, say, for example, a cyclist may be able to avoid the pothole, not always. The 40 mil criteria is set, and we would react to it within the timescales allocated within the externally appointed contractor. So we wouldn't, if it was on an active travel route, say, for example, would we react to it quicker? We haven't currently explored that or discussed it. Maybe that's something that we need to discuss with Emma and Colin Smith when we come to review maybe our code of practice. Maybe it's something that we've overlooked previously and we need to consider now.
Can I come, sorry, Chair, can I just come in before you come to the second point? I think it's really important we do that, because part of the 20 mile an hour, linking into the second part of the question, is to get people to cycle more. So we need to be in a position that's safer than it was before. So I think this is something that I'd urge and maybe we need to put this in as a recommendation, Chair. I think there's some nodding going on, and I think this is something we definitely need to review, I think, because the risk is much bigger than just a car being damaged. Sorry to cut across you there, Nathan.
I can see, no, that's fine. I can see an immediate concern, in as much as if we consider changing the intervention criteria specifically for cyclists, we're going to be repairing more potholes when we haven't necessarily got any more allocation of monies. I think the pothole budget is already stretched, but it's a very valid point.
Okay, I can see Councillor Liz Burnett would like to come in. Did you want to come in specifically on that point, Councillor Burnett, or can it wait till later on?
It was just to say that if you read the report, it's got consideration of active travel and cycle routes in there as an aim.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Hooper, you had a second question. So Nathan, if you've got can answer Councillor Hooper's second question, please.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to 20 mile an hour, I don't see there being any sort of increase or decrease, because the vehicle numbers are going to stay the same. The frequency of locations being used by traffic vehicles, I don't see that increasing or decreasing. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Perry, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, good evening again. Yeah, just go stay on the active travel routes. I cycled from Cardiff Road in Barry up to Barry Hospital a couple of months ago to see a resident, and it was quite slow going up the hill, and actually coming down the hill was terrifying and slower due to the condition of the roads. And it's not just the potholes, it's the joins between the different sections of bitumen, which were empty. And if your wheel goes in there, you're off the bike and you'll be on the floor. It's happened to me on one occasion. We have upstands in place on the A48. So you need to have curbs that are flush to the road when you want to take people on bicycles off the main carriageway. And unfortunately, and they've been put in for the last decade, there's a small upstand, and the small upstand, when you're coming off a main carriageway onto a shared footway, for example, can throw a person on a bicycle to the floor, hopefully not under a vehicle. So I just want to make you all aware of that. We have a primary route, which is apparently strategic, the A48, and it needs resurfacing. It's very low down on the list, but it's actually rutted. And if you cross the road in St Nicholas, it's actually, you have to be careful of how you tread without tripping over the ruts. The ruts are that deep, and the surface is all cracked, but it doesn't actually meet the criteria. So water's going to get, it's going to fail eventually. But in the meantime, it's a noisy surface, and it's a dangerous surface to actually walk across, but it's not being picked up by the current criteria that we've got. So that's something that really needs to be addressed. But again, I'm sure it would have been addressed if we put more budget to it. Because it is something that we all see, we all use, whether we're walking, cycling or driving a car. And if the road condition is so bad that it's affecting people who are walking, then actually we need to address that and support highways officers with a bit more funding. That is obviously much required. I have in the past used the app, but I found the app to be very basic and sometimes a little bit problematic. So if officers listening could have a look at the app, because I don't find it particularly user friendly at the moment. It's very, very basic, and though we don't want bells and whistles on it, it could be a little bit more user friendly. The report does talk about the essential parts of the defective highway without actually defining essential, because there are parts of the highway that are less essential than others. So you have you know, where the wheels of a vehicle go is normally essential, but the middle of the road is perhaps less essential, like in country lanes. If the middle foot fails, people walk to the side, people cycle to the side, the wheels go to the side perhaps. So it's not defined as to what an essential part of a defective highway is. And then I'll just finish quickly with another question or suggestion, and it talks a couple of times about the criteria for road scoring to be reviewed, and I would urge that is carried out, and that we introduce the 5 ways of working in road scoring, and issues like the health and well-being of people and road noise, because road noise isn't a factor at the moment. The people living close to that road and that surface, and I think that needs to be given higher priority under our duties under the well-being and the Health and Wellbeing of Future Generations Act.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I'm sure that Nathan's team regularly inspect the A48 to see what the issues are and whether they meet the criteria that we have. So I'm sure if it did meet that criteria, as it's a secondary road, if the M4 is shut, that it is kept as up to date as it can be with the finances that we do have, which are very limited, and we know why they're very limited. I don't know whether you wanted to say anything, Nathan. I was going to move on to the next councillor. You can if you want to. Or
no, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd Selby, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Nathan. One question, one comment. The comment, Councillor Hooper stole my question actually about the impact of the reduction in speed limits, because I guess my assumption has been that, you know, if there's damage to a road surface, cars hitting that at a higher speed might potentially make that damage worse, you know, churning up broken road service, for example. So yeah, I think I just assumed that might have a positive impact, but maybe it's too soon to say, and you know, maybe that's something that will feature at some point as a benefit. My comment is I've just been talking to somebody locally who is a wheelchair user and finds themselves very often with issues exiting their house because of road surface outside their house, having to kind of, you know, make detours because of problems with road surface. And I'm just wondering, I recognise that it's a small number of people, but nevertheless, we want to make sure that we're considering the needs of residents who have a disability and what, where that might feature in the criteria. I know it would be very specific and very localised to individual residents as opposed to large numbers of road users. So just interested to know whether we're ever able to consider those specific areas for residents in a particular area.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. It's not something that's included on the scoring matrix. However, we have lots of people, customers, reach out to us requesting drop curbs and the like, more generally in the more urban areas of, say, for example, Barry and Penarth, Cowbridge, not so much in the rural Vale, whereby there are no footways and they have to use the adopted carriageway for wheelchair movements. We record all of these requests. We have got a works register. But we haven't got any sort of allocation of money just yet. And as much as I would love to have a pot of money to get these works done, until the funds are available to us, then there's sort of, we just record that information only, sadly. But should money ever become available, then we can seek to explore opportunities to install drop curbs and the like.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful to know. So if we're aware of specific issues affecting vulnerable residents, we can still draw that to your attention, and it can go on the wish list.
Yeah, most definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ernest, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one to Nathan. Nathan, on your on Appendix A, which lists at location like 178, I'm particularly looking at Rectory Road in Penarth, which is a principal distributor road in the town centre. It's a one-way street and it has a bus. We talked about buses earlier, but it actually has a bus running along it every 10 minutes or more. I see that it's in the notes at the end. It requires approval, and I think it's the only road on that schedule that requires approval. It's not had any work done to it at all for many, many years. It's full of deep potholes and it makes a very uncomfortable ride for people on the buses going to the Windsor Road bus shelter. Can you give me any assurance on that? I know it's not my ward, but I travel it every day nevertheless. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ernest. The reason that is on there within the comments box stating requires removal, because that's one that has been suggested to us, whether it be through an elected member or even a member of the public, generally because of the poor condition, exactly what you're referring to now. But it's gone on the list, it's been assessed, but it hasn't had cabinet approval. Within the report, I'm just quickly trying to find where I've referenced it, but it does say, I think it's actually
it's halfway down the first page, if it's any help to you.
And just within the executive summary, it says, should the condition of any highway be such that it requires immediate attention, it is suggested to the Director of Environment and Housing be granted through delegated powers in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services to amend the plan. That is a prime example of, we've got it recorded, we know it's of poor condition, but it hasn't been approved as yet.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see anybody else has got their hand up at the moment. I think, you know, we've had a good discussion around this, and obviously, you know, as councillors, I'm sure we can find areas where we would like to sort of have, you know, sort of parts of the road resurfaced and things like that. But I think we all realise the dire straits that the budget is in at the moment, and why we've only got the very small amount for resurfacing and things like that. But I think Nathan had to say about ensuring that we report correctly to you, so that things come through to you. So like sort of, you know, if we need drop curbs or other issues with potholes and things like that, was it not via email but via a different way, Nathan?
Or via CR1V, simply so it's recorded. It'll always have an allocation. We'll know the date it was received, and we can record all of that information. But by all means, if the constituents wish to email in, then it's recorded in the same manner. And if they don't have a response or they're not happy with the response, I'm more than happy for elected members to bring it to my attention, and I can maybe send more of a personal response as to why, or I can even reach out and speak to the customer if needed.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for answering all those questions and bringing the report to us this evening. If we can just see whether we can move the recommendations for this report. Are people happy to accept the recommendations in front of us? Councillor Hooper, what? Thanks, you happy to support the recommendations?
No, I think we should ask Cabinet to give us assurance that they've considered bike travel. I hear the leader talking about active travel being considered, but this is not just active travel. The 20-mile-an-hour plan is to try and encourage people to use normal roads now, not just active travel roads. I think this is something that this committee should request assurance from the Cabinet that they've reflected that properly. So I'd like to just add that as an amendment. I don't know where it would go into this, what we agree, but we need to just push it back, because otherwise it just gets taken as it currently is.
I think it's already in the report, though, isn't it, about active travel?
We're a scrutiny committee. We're here to scrutinise Cabinet,
yes,
not
and
just
we have
accept things. So I would suggest that goes in there. I can be, people can say no, that's fine, but I suggest it goes in there.
If you have somebody who's happy to second that, then I'm sure, Cabinet can have a look at it. It's
I'm happy
Councillor
to second
Perry.
that, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Stephan. Right. OK. So if we can vote on the recommendation that's in front of us, if you'd like to reiterate your recommendation for the amendment.
That Cabinet review the process and give assurance that the roads, that the pothole strategy, the highway strategy, is suitable for bike riders on all roads, especially those that are now 20 miles an hour.
Okay. Okay. Right. So if we want to vote on that recommendation going forward, do people want to vote on that? Gareth?
Yes,
we can ask if there's dissent, can we first, perhaps?
Pardon, Gareth, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, Chair, I'll do the roll call. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Champion's left us, so I'll start with Councillor Drake. Are you for or against the recommendation?
Oh.
Councillor Drake, are you there, please?
Yes. Sorry, can I ask a question, Chair?
Yes, certainly.
Can I clarify, are we being asked to say whether we're for the recommendations as they stand within the current report, or are we being asked to express a view on the amendment that Councillor Hooper has proposed? It's important that we're clear.
I think we always go for the amendment first.
Yeah.
So the amendment always gets included first. So the amendment would be part of the recommendations. Is that correct, Gareth?
Yeah, Chair. What I'm taking is obviously Councillor Hooper's recommendation first. Yeah. And then we'll come to a substantial vote at the end, Chair. So if you just concentrate on Councillor Hooper's recommendations, Chair, we'll take the vote on that first.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So if you'd like to go ahead, then, Gareth, is that okay, Councillor Lloyd-Selby? Is that fine? Okay.
Okay, Councillor Drake, sorry, were you for or against Councillor Hooper's recommendation?
Against.
Councillor Driscoll, were you for or against the recommendation? Hello, Councillor Driscoll? Councillor Driscoll, are you there, please? Okay, I'll come back to that, Chair. Councillor Ernest, are you for or against the recommendation?
I'm for the recommendation.
Councillor Hooper, are you for or against the recommendation?
I'm for.
Councillor Iannucci, are you for or against the recommendation?
For.
Councillor Lloyd-Selby, are you for or against the recommendation?
Against.
Councillor Penn, are you for or against the recommendation? Councillor Penn? You're muted, Councillor. Councillor Penn, you're muted.
There
we
we
can't
go.
hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, I pressed a little red button on the thing. Yeah, I'm against, only because I'd like to know whether the report. No, I just
okay.
Second.
You can't really.
Like
you can't.
No,
we're just
I'd just like
voting
to know
at the
if it
moment.
is
You're just
taken into
against,
account
Elliot.
first.
You're just
We're
against.
just
You're
voting
just
at
against.
the moment,
You're
Councillor.
against, mate.
Councillor Hooper, I don't need your help, thank you.
No.
Councillor Penn, we are just voting at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Perks, are you for or against the recommendation?
Against.
Councillor Perry, are you for or against the recommendation?
For.
For. Okay.
Yep. For.
And Councillor William, are you for or against the recommendation?
For.
Okay, I'll give Councillor Driscoll one last opportunity.
Yeah.
Councillor Driscoll, are you there, please? Okay, Chair, I'll take it as a non-vote.
Yeah.
So that's 5 for and 4 against, Chair. So that is carried.
Okay, so then that be included in the recommendations that we have. Are we happy to accept all the recommendations that are in front of us?
No, Chair.
Yes.
I've my hand up. Sorry. Can I propose a second recommendation that, as well as active travel, we asked that the Cabinet consider road noise in the criteria for road resurfacing, simply because it's a matter of health and well-being of residents close to noisy surfaces.
Do we have anybody who seconds that? Councillor Hooper. If we can vote on this one, and then we'll see whether we can get to the final vote on the recommendations. Councillor Penn, was it something that you wanted to ask first, or Councillor Iannucci before we voted?
Yeah, I just want to. I would like to get clarification if the things that Councillor Hooper and Councillor Perry are or have proposed are actually included in assessments on roads, whether road noise, whether cycling is included, before we vote on them, because they might be, and this is a waste of time.
Yeah, well, Councillor Hooper's one we've already voted on, and that's been accepted.
No, I know, and apologies for
that's
not just
fine.
saying yes or no.
But whether Nathan can actually give us any indication on what Councillor Penn was asking about road noise and things like that, that would be helpful.
I certainly can. We currently don't consider road noise, and that's not built into the Cabinet approved scoring matrix. That's certainly something we'll have to consider exploring.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Iannucci, did you want to ask a question before we vote?
Yes, please. Sorry, I just wasn't sure specifically on the amendment that Councillor Perry suggested. My audio cut out a little bit, so I just couldn't hear it.
Right, okay. So, yes, Councillor Perry, if you'd like to reiterate your...
Yeah, I would like to, for the Cabinet to consider adding road noise to the criteria for determining which roads are put forward for resurfacing in the matrix, because currently they are not, and obviously road noise contributes to health and well-being positively or negatively.
Thank you. Emma Reid, would you like to come in to make a final point before we actually vote?
If that's okay, Chair.
Definitely.
Just to say that in terms of road noise, just for members' information, where the intervention level is reached, or it's at the top of the level for resurfacing or micro asphalt, we would ensure that we use the best material to reduce road noise. I would say it's a little bit challenging to actually include road noise as a criteria. That's just my professional judgment, just so you know.
Thank you very much. Right, okay. Gareth, can we, it's been moved and it's been seconded. So if we can vote on this recommendation as well, please.
Okay, so as before, Chair, Councillor Champion's left us, so I'll start with Councillor Drake. Councillor Drake, are you for or against Councillor Perry's recommendation?
Against.
Councillor Driscoll, are you there, please? Okay, Chair, I'll go to Councillor Ernest. Are you for or against the recommendation?
I'll support the recommendation 4.
Councillor Hooper, are you for or against the recommendation?
I'm for.
Councillor Iannucci, are you for or against the recommendation?
Against.
Okay, Councillor Lloyd Selby, are you for or against the recommendation?
Against.
Councillor Penn, are you for or against the recommendation? Councillor Penn?
Against.
Okay. Councillor Perks, are you for or against the recommendation?
Against.
Councillor Perry, are you for or against the recommendation?
Health and Wellbeing, for.
Okay, and Councillor William, are you for or against the recommendation?
I support this. I'm for it.
Okay, I'll try. Councillor Driscoll, are you there, please? Okay, Chair, on that basis, I've got 4 for and 5 against, so that falls, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, so if we can now, are we happy to accept all the recommendations that we have in front of us for this report on the road resurfacing? Yes? I don't see anybody against. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that debate and for all the you know, everyone being involved in it. I think it's really useful when a subject like this comes up that we are involved in it. Okay, so if we can now move to agenda item, bear with me one moment. If we can move to agenda item 7, which is the draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment report 2022 to 23. And I think, Emma, I think you're actually speaking on this or introducing this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I am speaking on this evening. So this is a reference for committee's consideration for the draft annual assessment report for 2022-23. As you may be aware, the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021 requires the Council to keep performance under review, consult and report on our performance through a method called self-assessment. In developing our performance arrangements for 23-24, we've considered the requirement of that Act, and we've tried to strengthen self-assessment opportunities within the Council by building in some performance challenge throughout the year, internally and externally, as well as developing what we term our internal insight. So by doing this more reflective, self-reflective approach as part of our performance management and governance arrangements has enabled us to build up a bigger and more robust evidence base for this year's annual assessment conclusions, and will also hopefully help us drive improvement through enhanced performance management arrangements. So attached to the report before you this evening is the Council's draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment. It's attached to Appendix A, and it's a position statement essentially on the Council's performance over the past year in delivering the ADP annual delivery plan priorities as aligned against the corporate plan wellbeing objectives. Its aim is to provide an honest and balanced account of the Council's achievements and challenges, and it also critically identifies areas where further improvement is required. So in terms of the self-assessment findings, we have drawn as a council on a number of varying information sources to try and assess our progress against the wellbeing objectives. These include quarterly annual performance and risk review reports, findings from our internal audit, annual government statements, information from our regulators, and also staff and other engagement findings. Further, each directorate self-assessment has been peer challenged to see how the directorate services are actually applying the 5 ways of working. So reviewing all of this information has assisted us to develop a balanced picture of the Council's improvement journey over the last year, and has also enabled us to identify improvement areas which will be used for 2024-25. Also, in response to feedback from elected members previously, there's detailed information provided within each of the sections contained within Appendix A of the many and varied engagement and consultation exercises that have happened during the year. So, taking all of that research, all of that evidence, we believe that on balance, we've met our annual delivery plan commitments for 2022-23, even though it was an another extremely challenging year for the council. And as such, the report suggests that it's was attributed a judgment of good, which reflects an achievement of over 85% of the year's activities and performance targets. So looking at the sections council use of resources and governance, information from the Directorate Self-Assessments again has judged the use of resources to be good, because we believe there is good evidence of how we've used our resources economically, efficiently, effectively, and also equitably to enhance performance. So that is the report. Obviously, there's the Appendix A is quite detailed, and hopefully members have had a chance to have a look through it, but I'm happy, along with my colleague Phil Chappell, to answer any questions you may have on our service areas.
Councillor Hooper, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Emma. We took this at governance and audit, so I'm not going to repeat the points I made there, but one thing that's relevant to this committee. Sorry, Elliot, we said something. One thing that's relevant to this committee is that we reflect the things that we've spoken about during the last year. And if we were to ask, Emma, you mentioned this was balanced at the start. If we were to look at the balance and took it from the perspective of our residents, they would certainly mention the fact that we've changed our garden waste collection and gone to 3 weekly bin bag collection. And we're not putting that in the structure of the forward. It's all very positive work. And I think if we're going to have balance, and it should be balance, we need to reflect the changes that, and there can be a narrative that said we have to take tough decisions. We've heard those sort of narratives before. That's fine, but it needs to be balanced. So if we want it to be something that's of worth, I think it should have more balance in it. It's a point we made last night. The rest of the points I made, I'm not going to make again, but that's the only one for this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. What I would say is that with the finite budget that we do have, that those, as you know, those decisions have to be made. We have to find the money from somewhere to make sure our education and social services run in full. So it is hard decisions at this time. But Emma, if you want to say anything, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, Chair, absolutely. I'd echo that. But I think in terms of the waste changes, yes, we have moved to 3 weekly black bags, but you can still put the same number of bags out. We haven't reduced the amount of black bags you can put out. It's every 3 weeks now, not every 2. And in terms of green waste collections, that has to become a chargeable service. It's something that was considered through the budget process. So it's something we've had to implement in order to maintain good use of our resources. And that is one of the self-assessment criteria that has been mentioned earlier this evening. Again, that's a non-statutory service. It's a service which is very useful for our recycling, but it's a service that lots of other councils do charge for. So we're not unique in what we're doing there, but what we are trying to do is trying to keep within budget, as well as trying to get our recycling rates better recycling rates, although we are very, very near the top in terms of recycling rates. So I would argue that that's just better use of resources.
Thank you, Emma. And I can't see any other hands up for this report. So I'm assuming that people are happy to accept this report that's in front of us and accept the recommendations that are made. Yes? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So now if we can move to agenda item 10, and I believe Phil Chappell, you're going to give some headline points on this one here, and then if we've got any questions, things like that, we can ask those. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. If you'd like to go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this report presents the Council's progress against the annual delivery plan for the first quarter of this year. As you can see, it's a big report. It's 199 pages. So I guess I'm drawing your attention to specific areas. So from page 8 onwards, there's a sort of a 9-page summary in presentation form. So the summary, it summarizes the achievements and the areas for improvement, along with some of the areas for development and the emerging concerns. So I understand that the way that the emerging areas for concerns and improvement are set out reflects some changes requested by elected members. So and they're also service plan specific. And the report highlights the areas relating to this committee here as well, and uses, like a lot of the reports as you've had before, a RAG system, red, amber, green status. And I don't plan on going through all of the areas on those 9 pages, but I suppose there's some headlines that are there, related to the kind of planned activities within the remit of environmental and regeneration scrutiny. Some of the headlines, I suppose, 93% were attributed as a green performance status, 1% were attributed an amber status, and 6% were red status, and those are shown in the slides. And I think what we're seeking is elected members' consideration of Q1 performance results and the proposed remedial actions to address the areas identified for underperformance. And the views of scrutiny will be referred to Cabinet for consideration and any recommendations.
Do I have? Thank you, Phil. Do I have any questions? Councillor Hooper, if you'd like to ask your question or make your statement, please.
Thank you, Phil. And this may be one for Emma, actually. So maybe it's on the exceptions report on at Appendix B. We talk about there's a lot of it looks as though limited resources is down there for quite like, but there's one that's of particularly interest to residents of the island, is complete and deliver the enforcement and parking enforcement policy. And it says no work has been done, but Emma, work has been done on this, hasn't it? Because you've done some of the work on it. I just wonder where it is, and is it now going to be rolled into any other strategies at the same time before it comes to fruition? Thank you.
Hello, Emma, did you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So in terms of the direction of travel for the 2 targets, there's 2 separate things, Councillor Hooper. So there's one which relates to the enforcement policy, which is it actually in draft with officers, but needs to be tightened up. Then there's a second project which is to do with the residents' parking permits and how we take those forward. Both of them are within draft, but the residents' parking permits have been, I was going to say parked, but it's a bit late in the evening for that, have just been temporarily parked. Just while we deliver a number of other things within the team, including the waste measures that you mentioned earlier, and the 20-mile-an-hour rollout, which has also been mentioned earlier. So the permits are now due to be picked up, along with another item that I mentioned earlier this evening, which is the tree strategy. So those are the next things on our list to move forward. So unfortunately, we do have limited resources. We do have limited skilled resources, and we're also very operational. So yeah, it's challenging at the moment, Councillor Hooper, but rest assured it is on the work programme.
Thank you. Did you want to come back in, Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether Emma can give us an idea as to when these items are likely to see the light of day. Do we have a rough idea? Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the enforcement policy, I'm waiting to, I'm not waiting, but I want to know what's happening with pavement parking. So there's due to be a consultation earlier next year. So I'd like to wrap the enforcement policy up with the pavement parking policy. So that would be that element of it. In terms of the permits, I'm hoping to get something to you before Christmas, but my first priority is the tree strategy, and then it will be the permits.
Thank you. So I don't see anybody else with their hands up. Are we happy to accept the 2 recommendations that are in front of us for this report, for Q1 report? Yes? Thank you. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of business for this evening. I have nothing urgent under part 1 or part 2. And just like to thank everybody for their input tonight on all the different reports and we've had in front of us. I believe the next meeting is on, sorry, I'm looking, it's in October. So we'll see you in October, and thank you all the officers for your input as well. You know, we always appreciate the reports that you bring in front of us that are detailed and give us the opportunity to scrutinise. So thank you very much for your time as well. So thank you everybody, and good night. Thank you.
And thank